So this final video is just a way of sort of wrapping up some of the things that I said before. But again, as I stated in the last video, none of this is going to be on the exam. But I just think it's something worth thinking about when we think about our judiciary. And that is, I titled this The Courts and Democracy, right? And in part, I was sort of being ironic in as much as the founders intended the courts to be non-democratic. I mean, the House of Representatives and the Senate are supposed to be reflective of a republic and a democracy, but people were supposed to have some kind of say in who their senators are going to be, who their members of the House are going to be. And the same thing with the president. Now, back when the Constitution was originally adopted, the only group that we voted for directly were members of the House. Remember, the Senate was elected indirectly by state legislatures. The president was elected indirectly through these electors. But over time, through history, as the progressive movement is what it was called, took on more and more force, there was a greater demand for more democracy, right? And so the House was still elected directly. The Constitution was amended so that senators were elected democratically. More people were brought into the franchise, meaning more people were allowed to vote. First, black men were allowed to vote, then women were allowed to vote. Then the age of voting requirements went from 21 to 18. There's an expansion of the franchise, is what it's called. But just as the founders intended, the courts still are not democratic. There's no electoral accountability if the courts make a decision that goes against what people want, because of a provision in the Constitution that says that once you're appointed to a federal court, and again, this is federal, it's a lifetime appointment. And so decisions are not supposed to reflect public opinion or the popular will of the people. Judges aren't supposed to be looking at what the latest Gallup poll says about views on same-sex marriage, views on reproductive rights, abortion, on the legalization of marijuana. They're just supposed to be looking at the Constitution in different ways, right? Strict constructionists look at it one way, loose constructionists look at it a different way, but it's supposed to be a non-democratic institution. And as a result of that, the courts have often acted as an impediment to change because there's no accountability. There are times when the public's views are moving, but because the courts tend to be like sort of a reflection of the last group that was in power, but they're still appointed for a lifetime appointment, oftentimes the public may have moved on, but the people who were in power before got to appoint the judges, and those people's appointees are still in power, right? But the public has moved on. And so they wind up declaring laws unconstitutional, even though they have widespread support. And then there are other times when the courts have been the vanguard for change, pushing change, when the public isn't quite there yet, moving things along. I would say that without the courts' involvement, the civil rights movement would have moved much more slowly. And so the courts play a weird role in our political system, an important one, not necessarily a democratic one. And as I said in the last video, I would argue, what this does is it provides stability. It makes it so that change happens slowly in the United States. You have to build a huge consensus. That consensus has to be maintained for long enough that The people who are elected are nominating judges who agree with the consensus. And every once in a while, things are out of whack. Every once in a while, public opinion is here, and the views of the courts are here. And it may very well be that that's where we are today as far as views on reproductive rights. So on May 21st now, 2022, it's going to be a month or so where the courts are going to render a decision on Roe versus Wade. And if they make a decision that is out of line with public opinion, I don't think it's accurate to say that they did something wrong, because they're not supposed to be looking at public opinion. But the extent to which people put faith in our political institutions, that's part of what makes democracy work. And if the courts make a decision that is wildly out of step with the views of the public, I have a feeling that that's going to take their trust in our institutions are going to take a hit. People already don't trust Congress. People are less and less trustworthy of the presidency. Democrats don't trust the president if the president's a Republican. Republicans don't trust the presidency if the president is a Democrat. There's always concern that the president of the other party is trying to be an authoritarian. And the courts were the place where, despite this drop in trust in Congress, drop in trust in the presidency, the courts were this place where people still had a bit of trust. And one of the things that I worry about, and again, depending on when you're watching this, you'll be in a much better position to evaluate this, is that if people also lose trust in the courts, what does it do to our democracy? What does it do to the strength of democracy? Maybe nothing. Or maybe it'll have a big impact. We'll have to see. So I just wanted to wrap all this up. None of this is going to be on the exam. If you took the time to watch and listen to this, thank you. I appreciate it. These are sort of like me just sort of rambling more than usual. But I did think it was important to talk about this and at least get it on record as for my own personal satisfaction, I guess. Okay, that's the end of the Judiciary lectures. I hope you feel like you learned something.